I was a billionaire heiress of the Vance family in New York. 10 years ago, against all objections, I married Carter Miller, a penniless estate security guard. After our wedding, he treated me like a queen. He even carried warm water to the bedside every night just to wash my feet. The Manhattan socialites who used to mock me for being blind ended up burning with jealousy, wishing they had married such a perfect man. Unfortunately, my health was always fragile, and I died of illness at the age of 30. After my death, my soul couldn't bear to leave him, so I hovered by his side. But I never expected what would happen the very next day after my funeral. My perfect husband, who had been crying his eyes out by my deathbed, couldn't wait to marry 4 women at once. Only then did I realize that his 10 years of pampering me were nothing but a patient act to steal my family's fortune. Even my declining health was all thanks to the healthy herbal tonic he served me every single night. Watching them divide my billions in front of my funeral portrait, a surge of pure rage hit my soul. I gasped, and my eyes snapped open. I was alive again. With trembling hands, I grabbed the phone from the nightstand and lit up the screen. The date displayed on the screen was 10 years ago. I had traveled back in time. I was back to the days before I married that trash, Carter Miller. Just then, there was a knock on the bedroom door. Maria, our housekeeper, called out from outside. "Miss Serena, are you awake? Mr. Miller is downstairs. He's causing quite a scene, saying he needs to see you urgently." "Mr. Miller? Carter Miller." The warmth in my eyes vanished instantly. "I got it. Tell him to wait." I turned around, walked into my walk-in closet, and leisurely picked out a silk slip dress. Then, I spent my time applying a cold, sharp makeup look. After dragging my feet for over an hour, I finally stepped into my heels and walked out of the bedroom. Descending the spiral staircase, I saw Carter sitting on the velvet sofa. Hearing the click of my heels, Carter looked up abruptly. When he saw me coming down, a flash of awe crossed his eyes, but it was quickly replaced by impatience. "What took you so long?" Carter stood up, complaining to me with zero respect. "I've been waiting for you for over an hour, Serena." Hearing his whining tone made me want to throw up. In my past life, he had used this exact persona. "I may be poor, but I don't care about your money, and I'm not afraid of you," to make me fall head over heels for him. I didn't run up to hug him like I used to. Instead, I crossed my arms and looked down at him coldly. "What do you want?" Carter choked on my icy attitude. His arrogant demeanor weakened a bit, but he quickly put on a show of having his pride wounded. "Serena, did you pay my mother's $300,000 hospital bill behind my back?" Carter looked as if he had suffered a great humiliation. "How many times do I have to tell you? I will earn the money to treat my mother myself. I don't need your charity." Watching his righteous performance, I sneered inwardly. In my past life, when I heard this, I would immediately apologize to him, telling him I only did it because it broke my heart to see him working 3 part-time jobs after his guard shifts. To protect his fragile, ridiculous ego, I had even secretly upgraded his mother to the best VIP suite under his name. And what did he do? He enjoyed everything my money bought while playing the victim of my wealthy arrogance. What a natural-born actor. "Oh, really?" I glanced at him coldly, a mocking smirk playing on my lips. "In that case, fine. I'll call my assistant in a minute and tell him to claw back that $300,000 from the hospital." The moment those words left my mouth, the fake anger on Carter's face froze. He never expected me to play along. Carter panicked, but he quickly forced himself to stay calm and yelled at me. "Serena, what do you take me for?" He looked like he was about to burst with rage. "Do you think you can do whatever you want to me just because you have money? I won't buy into your rich girl games." Looking at his hypocritical face, I couldn't help but laugh out loud. "What are you laughing at?" Carter's face flushed bright red, stung by my laughter. Right then, my phone buzzed inside my bag. It was my dad. I raised my hand and gestured for Carter to shut up. Carter gritted his teeth, forcing himself to swallow his words. From the other end of the line, my father's helpless voice came through. "Serena, I know you've been close with that security guard lately, but you two belong to different worlds. He can't give you a good life. Stop being so stubborn. I've arranged a match for you. He's Julian Sterling, the heir of the Sterling family. He's handsome and highly respected. Just listen to me meet him and see how it goes, okay?" In my past life, when I heard this, I had a massive fight with my dad. I had screamed that I would marry no one but Carter, even threatening to starve myself, breaking my dad's heart. But in this life, I looked at the ungrateful man in front of me with a half smile. "An arranged match? Sure, Dad. Send me the address. I'll be there on time this afternoon." Hearing me agree so easily, my dad was thrilled. He quickly said some sweet words and sent the address to my phone. After I hung up, Carter stared at me, his face turning pale and green. Serena, have you had enough of this drama? Do you think going on a date with some random guy will make me jealous? You don't have to play hard to get my attention. Carter. I snapped. You've been thinking way too highly of yourself lately. Remember your place. You. Carter gritted his teeth. Fine. Don't regret this. He threw a tantrum, turned around, and stormed out of my house. Watching his back, I smiled with pure disdain. Regret? The only thing I regretted was being blind enough to love a piece of trash like you in my past life. That afternoon, I arrived at the high-end cafe my dad had texted me. In my past life, due to Carter's brainwashing, I absolutely despised business marriages. I hadn't even given the sterling heir a single glance. But this time, when I walked into the reserved lounge and saw the man sitting there, I couldn't help but praise my dad's taste. He wore a perfectly tailored dark Italian suit. He was stunning. Miss Vance, nice to meet you. I'm Julian Sterling. He stood up, politely offering his hand. His voice was deep and magnetic. Mr. Sterling, the pleasure is mine. I smiled and shook his hand. The date was surprisingly pleasant. Julian was not only incredibly handsome, but he was also elegant, polite, and brilliant. We talked about everything from venture capital to art collection. We clicked perfectly. Over the next few days, Julian asked me out for various reasons. We went to concerts, visited art galleries, and even went horseback riding at a private club. I hadn't thought about the disgusting name Carter for days. Until one evening. After a dinner at a Michelin star restaurant, Julian gentlemanly drove me home. It's still early. Would you like to come in for some tea? I stood at the door, smiling as I invited him. I'd love to. Julian smiled back, his beautiful eyes sparkling with warmth. I scanned my fingerprint to unlock the door, pushed it open, and was about to invite him in. But as soon as I looked up, I saw Carter sitting comfortably on my living room sofa. Seeing me bring another man home, Carter's face turned incredibly dark. He looked at me, his tone accusing. Serena, it's so late. Why are you bringing another man home? I frowned, feeling sickened by his tone. Carter, watch your tongue. I am your employer. Being scolded in front of an outsider, Carter's face flushed bright red instantly. What are you standing there for? I ordered him around like any other servant. Go to the kitchen and brew some black tea for Mr. Sterling. Hearing my words, the resentment in Carter's eyes almost spilled over. But forced by my status, he could only turn and walk toward the kitchen with reluctance. Mr. Sterling, please have a seat. I'll go change into something more comfortable. I turned to Julian and smiled. Sure. Julian nodded, giving me a deep, knowing look. I went upstairs and changed into a set of cozy loungewear. Just as I reached the turn of the stairs on my way down, a loud crash echoed from the living room, followed by Carter's painful scream. I rushed downstairs. I saw Carter clutching his left hand, crouching by the coffee table in pain. Meanwhile, Julian stood nearby, looking completely calm. What happened?
I walked over, frowning.
Serena. He pushed me. Seeing me come down, Carter immediately started playing the victim. I was just trying to serve him tea, but he was jealous that I get to be close to you. He deliberately threw the boiling tea at me. Julian met my gaze, his voice steady. Miss Vance, I didn't push him. He tripped. I looked down at Carter's hand. The so-called burn was barely the size of a fingernail. It didn't even blister. Looking at Carter's pathetic act, I let out a cold laugh. Cut the drama, Carter. It's just a tiny red spot. Why are you whining like a child? Just put a band-aid on it. Hearing me side with an outsider, Carter couldn't hold back his anger anymore. Serena Vance. Ignoring his rage, I turned to Julian with an apologetic smile. Mr. Sterling, I'm so sorry. My servant doesn't know his manners. I apologize for the scene. It's getting late, so why don't you head home and get some rest? Let's hang out another day. Julian glanced at the shaking, furious Carter, and a faint smirk appeared on his face.
All right.
Rest well, Serena. Good night. After Julian left, only Carter and I remained in the living room. Carter stared at me with red eyes, his voice filled with disbelief and hurt. Serena, I feel like you've changed. Looking at his hurt expression, I felt absolutely nothing. Have I? With that, I didn't even look at him again. I turned around and walked upstairs. Over the next few days, he didn't dare to act high and dry in front of me anymore. Instead, he started clinging to me like cheap gum, trying desperately to show his worth. Every morning before I even woke up, He would prepare breakfast. When I left for work, he would open the car door for me. He even learned a few clumsy French pickup lines to please me. Faced with his groveling behavior, I wasn't touched, nor did I kick him out. I simply enjoyed his service guilt-free. Occasionally, I would answer Julian's calls right in front of him, or dress up beautifully to go on romantic dates with Julian. Every time this happened, Carter would lower himself even more, trying to win me back. I knew he was terrified. He was terrified of losing me, his ticket to a life of luxury. He was terrified that his dream of marrying into wealth would shatter. And when a person is consumed by fear and anxiety, they easily make mistakes. I was quietly waiting for the day he would show his true, ugly colors. Finally, the opportunity came. These days, my company was preparing for a massive international merger. I worked late for several nights in a row, coming home past midnight. Tonight, I was sitting in my study, double-checking the final financial reports on my computer. There was a soft knock on the door, and Carter walked in carrying a tray. "Serena, still working?" Carter walked over and set the tray down. On the tray was a bowl of dark, pungent medicinal herbal tea. "I saw how tired you've been lately. You look pale. I brewed this special organic herbal tea for you." Carter looked at me, his eyes filled with warmth and care. "Drink it while it's hot, then get some sleep." Smelling that familiar, slightly bitter scent, my hand holding the pen froze. In my past life, he had looked at me with this exact loving expression, serving me this toxic tea every single night. I had drunk it for 10 years until my body completely fell apart, and I died in agony. I took a deep breath, suppressing the urge to kill him right then and there. I picked up the bowl, slowly bringing it to my lips. Carter stood by, his eyes shining with a hidden, desperate anticipation. Just as the rim of the bowl was about to touch my lips, I stopped. I slowly lowered the bowl and pushed it right in front of Carter. "Serena? What's wrong?" Carter was stunned. I leaned back in my chair, staring at him. "I just remembered a rule in the Vance family." "What rule?" Carter asked, confused. "Any untried food must be tasted by a servant first. You drink it." The moment I said this, Carter's face turned pale. "Serena, what do you mean by that?" He looked at me in disbelief. "Are you doubting me? Do you think I'd poison you?" His eyes turned red instantly, and he cried out in hurt. "I might be poor, but my love for you is pure. How can you treat me like some shady criminal?" I said nothing. Seeing my cold face, Carter gritted his teeth. "Fine. If you don't trust me, I'll show you." He grabbed the bowl, tilted his head, and gulped down the dark tea in seconds. Then, he slammed the empty bowl back onto the tray. "Are you satisfied now?" He stormed out of the study. I sneered. So, what if he drank it? It was a slow, chronic poison. Drinking it once or twice wouldn't do any harm. Once he left, I opened a hidden folder on my computer and pulled up the mansion's security cameras. My dad had installed these tiny, discreet cameras for my safety when the estate was built. Carter knew nothing about them. On the screen, Carter hadn't left the mansion. He walked downstairs, made sure no one was around, and slipped into the first-floor utility room. On the camera, all the warmth on Carter's face was replaced by a deadly chill. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number. As soon as the call connected, he whispered angrily, "The plan has to change. That bitch Serena suspects something's wrong with the tea." Though his voice was low, the high-definition mic in the utility room picked up every single word. The person on the other end said something, making Carter's expression look even more vicious. "I know. We can't wait anymore. We need a faster method. Just make sure everything on your end is ready." Hanging up, Carter paced around the room for a bit before walking out as if nothing had happened. I knew he was finally panicking and getting desperate. I dialed a private investigator's number. I ordered them to dig up everything on Carter. At the next high-profile charity gala, I made sure to arrive arm in arm with Julian. When reporters asked about our relationship, I leaned against Julian's shoulder and announced with a smile, "I've accepted Mr. Sterling's proposal. The date of our engagement party will be announced soon." Julian was slightly surprised, but he played along perfectly, planting a tender kiss on my forehead. Not only that, but I also paid off several major New York gossip outlets. The next morning, the headlines flooded the city. #heiress Serena Vance to marry Sterling heir. Poor guard's billionaire dream shattered. #. A guard trying to climb the social ladder? Serena Vance announces engagement, making Carter Miller the laughingstock of NYC. #. I expected Carter to confront me after such humiliation. But to my surprise, he held it in. He still showed up at my house every day, acting even more submissive and attentive. It was as if he could swallow any insult just to stay by my side. His behavior only made me more alert. A silent dog bites the hardest. 3 days later, the private investigator sent me the report. The file showed that over the past week, Carter had been meeting with Leo, our family's private chauffeur. Leo's son had piled up massive gambling debts and was being chased by dangerous loan sharks. Carter had offered Leo $5 million to cut the brakes of my red Porsche and stage an accident. Once I died, Carter would use a forged will to claim my entire estate. But what shocked me the most was the last page of the report. The PI found out that the person pulling the strings behind Carter was actually someone inside my own family. However, the mastermind was extremely cautious, and the PI couldn't pin down their exact identity yet. Cold sweat soaked my back as I read the report. It turned out that the person who wanted me dead wasn't just Carter, but also a dear relative of mine. I forced myself to calm down. Since I couldn't find the mastermind, I had to lure them out. Leaning back in my chair, a brilliant plan took shape in my mind. Since they wanted me dead so badly,
Fine.
I would give them exactly what they wanted and die once. The very next morning, I summoned Julian to my private estate. If I was going to pull off a flawless death, I needed an accomplice whose resources matched my own, and more importantly, someone whose mind was as ruthlessly sharp as mine. Julian arrived within 20 minutes. He walked into my study, his tailored suit impeccable as always, but his eyes instantly caught the gravity in the room. I handed him the private investigator's dossier without a word. I watched his dark eyes scan the pages. The polite, gentle veneer of the sterling air slowly melted away, revealing the cold, calculating predator beneath. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "They want to cut your brakes," Julian murmured, his voice deadly quiet. He didn't ask if it was true. He didn't gasp in horror. He just looked up at me, his gaze dark and unreadable. "And you want to let them?" "Not exactly," I smiled, tracing the rim of my teacup. "I want to give them the illusion of success. I want to die, Julian. Only a dead woman can see the true faces of the vultures circling her estate. But I can't do it alone. I need a coroner on payroll, a burned-out chassis, and a very convincing explosion." Julian slowly closed the folder. He stepped closer, leaning his hands on my desk, bringing his face dangerously close to mine. "Do you have any idea how risky this is, Serena? If the timing is off by a fraction of a second." "Are you afraid?" I challenged, meeting his gaze without flinching. A slow, dangerous smirk spread across his lips. "I'm not afraid, darling. I'm furious. No one touches my fiancé. If you want to play a ghost, I'll build you the perfect graveyard." The first piece of the puzzle was Leo, the chauffeur. Later that evening, I had my head of security bring Leo to the soundproof basement of the estate. When I walked in, Leo was trembling, clutching his cap. "Miss Vance, I don't understand. Why am I here?" he stammered. I tossed a bank statement onto the table in front of him. It was a record of his son's gambling debts, $7 million owed to the Russian mob. Next to it, I placed a recording device. I pressed play, and Carter's voice echoed through the cold room, offering Leo $5 million to cut my brakes. Leo's knees gave out. He collapsed onto the floor, sobbing. "Miss Vance, please. I haven't done it yet." He threatened to have my son killed if I didn't comply. I swear on my life, I wouldn't have gone through with it. I looked down at the weeping man. In my past life, Leo had driven me for 5 years, always playing the loyal servant. Yet, when Carter took over the estate after my death, Leo had miraculously been promoted to head of logistics. "Stand up, Leo," I ordered coldly. He scrambled to his feet, shaking like a leaf. "I am going to pay off your son's debt tonight," I said, watching his eyes widen in disbelief. "I am also wiring $10 million to an offshore account in your name, and I have already arranged for your son to be relocated to Switzerland under a new identity." Leo stared at me, his jaw slack. Why are you doing this?" "Because you are still going to cut my brakes, Leo," I whispered, stepping closer to him. "You're going to do exactly what Carter asked. You will report to him that the job is done. But if you deviate from my instructions by a single millimeter, the Russians will find your son before the sun rises. Do we have an understanding?"
Yes.
"Yes, Miss Vance. Whatever you say." For the next 3 days, life continued as normally as possible. Carter remained entirely clueless, playing his part as the desperate, devoted lover. He brought me my herbal tea every night, which I poured down the sink the moment he left the room. He continued to polish my shoes, open my doors, and stare at me with those pathetic, puppy dog eyes that hid the soul of a venomous snake. Thursday arrived, the day of my scheduled accident. The plan was flawless. I was supposed to drive my red Porsche to a secluded cliffside villa I owned in upstate New York for a weekend retreat. Julian had purchased the entire mountain road 2 days prior, shutting it down under the guise of private construction. Before I got into the car, Carter stood by the driveway, handing me a thermos of hot coffee. "Drive safe, Serena," he said softly, his eyes filled with a sickeningly sweet fake concern. "The roads up there can be treacherous. I wish you'd let me drive you." "I prefer to drive myself today, Carter," I said, slipping on my sunglasses. "I'll see you on Monday." "I'll be waiting," he smiled. "Yes, you will," I thought. "You'll be waiting for a police call." The drive up the mountain was an adrenaline rush. As I hit the winding roads, I pressed the brake pedal. Nothing. It went straight to the floor. Leo had done his job. My heart pounded in my chest, but I didn't panic. A mile ahead, a massive barricade of padded shipping containers had been set up out of sight from the main road. Julian's private security team was waiting. I steered the car perfectly into the catch netting, the vehicle violently halting with a screech of tearing metal. Before the dust even settled, Julian wrenched the door open. He pulled me out, his hands gripping my shoulders tightly. "Are you hurt?" "Not a scratch." I breathed, my heart racing. Julian pulled me into a fierce, sudden embrace, burying his face in my hair for a brief second before pulling back. "Good. Now, let's give them a show." His men immediately went to work. They pushed a hollowed-out, identical red Porsche chassis to the edge of the cliff. Inside it, they placed a medical cadaver Julian had procured, a Jane Doe whose height and build matched mine. The teeth had been surgically replaced with dental molds perfectly matching my records. Julian handed me a detonator. I looked at the car, thinking of the naive, sickly girl from my past life who died in bed, gasping for air while her husband counted her money in the next room. I pressed the button. A deafening explosion echoed through the mountains. The red Porsche plummeted off the cliff, engulfed in a massive fireball, crashing onto the jagged rocks below. Black smoke billowed into the gray sky. "Serena Vance is dead," Julian whispered, wrapping his coat around my shoulders. "Now, let's watch the rats come out to feast." For the next week, I lived in Julian's heavily fortified penthouse in Manhattan. Through a network of hidden cameras and private wiretaps, I watched the world react to my death. The media went into a frenzy. Billionaire heiress killed in tragic car crash. Vance empire in mourning. My father had been informed of the truth by Julian an hour before the news broke. We couldn't risk him having a heart attack. He put on the performance of a lifetime, weeping outside the police station, demanding answers. But the real star of the show was Carter. Watching him through the hidden cameras in my estate was like watching an Oscar-winning performance. When the police delivered the news, Carter collapsed onto the foyer floor, screaming my name, tearing at his hair. He cried so violently that he actually vomited. "Serena."
No.
"It can't be. Take me instead." He howled, beating his fists against the marble floor. Sitting on Julian's sofa, sipping a glass of rare Bordeaux, I couldn't help but slow clap at the screen. "He really is quite talented," Julian remarked, sitting beside me, his arm draped casually behind my shoulders. "If he weren't a sociopath, he could have made it in Hollywood." "Keep watching," I smiled coldly. "The tears will dry soon." I was right. 3 days after my funeral, an extravagant affair where Carter nearly threw himself into my empty casket, the atmosphere at the Vance estate shifted. It was midnight. Carter was sitting in my study, the very room where he used to serve me poison. He poured himself a glass of my father's $50,000 Macallan whiskey. He walked over to my portrait hanging above the fireplace. The fake grief was entirely gone. A twisted, ecstatic grin stretched across his face. 30 years old, Carter chuckled, raising his glass to my painted face. "You didn't even make it to 31, you stupid, arrogant bitch. You thought you were so high and mighty? You thought you could treat me like a dog? Well, who's the master now?" He took a slow sip, his eyes gleaming with raw greed. "Don't worry, Serena. I'll take good care of your money, and your cars, and that massive bed of yours." Suddenly, the study doors opened. I leaned forward on the sofa, my breath catching. Here it is. The mastermind. A tall, silver-haired man walked into the room. He wore a sharp bespoke suit, holding a silver-tipped cane. "Uncle Robert," I whispered, the name tasting like ash in my mouth. "Robert Vance. My father's younger brother. The COO of Vance Corporation. The man who had bought me my first pony, who had smiled warmly at every family dinner, who always told me I was the daughter he never had." "Are you celebrating without me, Carter?" Robert asked, his voice smooth and cold. "Mr. Vance, Carter immediately stood up, his arrogance replaced by a subservient nod. Of course not. I was just admiring the view. Robert scoffed, walking over to my desk and sitting in my chair. Don't get too comfortable, boy. The job isn't finished. Tomorrow is the will reading. Do you have the document? Carter reached into his jacket and pulled out a thick envelope. Signed, sealed, and backdated. The forgery is flawless. It leaves 70% of her personal shares to me, her devoted fiancé, and appoints you as the sole executor of the estate. Excellent, Robert smiled, taking the envelope. With those shares, combined with mine, I will finally have the majority voting power. I'll oust my idiot brother from the CEO position by Friday. And as promised, Carter, you will walk away with $500 million and the European properties. Not bad for a security guard. I earned every penny, Carter spat. Do you have any idea what it was like? Pretending to love that frigid, condescending brat? Boiling that damned slow-acting poison every night, only for her to suddenly get suspicious and make me drink it. It matters little now, Robert said dismissively. The break failure was much cleaner anyway. Once the board officially recognizes this will, the Vance empire is mine. I sat back on the sofa in Julian's penthouse, my blood running ice cold. Uncle Robert. He had funded Carter. He had provided the untraceable poison. He had orchestrated my murder just to steal the company from my father. A warm hand covered mine. Julian was looking at me, his eyes dark with a lethal promise. They won't get a single dime, Julian said softly. I'm going to ruin them both. No, I replied, a chilling smile curling my lips. We are. The next morning, the Vance corporate headquarters was swarming with media. The reading of my will was taking place in the grand boardroom on the top floor. The entire board of directors was present, along with my father, Uncle Robert, and Carter. I stood in the underground parking garage, adjusting the cuffs of my bespoke, blood-red silk suit. I paired it with 6-inch stiletto heels. If I was coming back from the dead, I was going to do it with style. Julian stood beside me, surrounded by 20 of his elite private security guards, along with 2 federal prosecutors I had invited for the occasion. Ready, Miss Vance? Julian asked, offering his arm. More than ever, Mr. Sterling. I looped my arm through his. We took the private elevator to the top floor. Through the glass walls of the boardroom, I could see the meeting was well underway. The estate lawyer was holding the forged document, looking extremely uncomfortable. This is highly unusual, the lawyer stammered. This will was allegedly signed 3 weeks ago, but it completely supersedes the trust Miss Vance established last year. Are you questioning the validity of my niece's signature? Uncle Robert demanded, slamming his hand on the table. Serena was deeply in love with Carter. It makes perfect sense she would want to secure his future. My brother is simply too blinded by grief to see reason. My father sat at the head of the table, his face perfectly impassive. He knew I was coming. I loved her. Carter suddenly burst into tears, covering his face with his hands. I didn't want her money. I just wanted her. I told her not to leave me this much, but she insisted. She said I was the only one who truly cared about her. Some of the board members looked at Carter with pity. If there are no further legal objections, Robert declared, standing up and buttoning his jacket, I suggest we proceed with the transfer of assets. I have an objection. My voice sliced through the heavy oak doors as Julian's guards pushed them wide open. The entire boardroom froze. The silence was so absolute you could hear a pin drop. I walked into the room, my red heels clicking rhythmically against the polished marble floor. I let go of Julian's arm and walked straight toward the head of the table. The lawyer dropped the forged will. It fluttered to the floor. One of the board members gasped, clutching his chest. But the reactions of Robert and Carter were absolute poetry. Carter's fake tears stopped instantly. His face drained of all color, turning a sickly, translucent white. His eyes bulged out of his head, as if he were looking at a demon clawing its way out of hell. He stumbled backward, his chair tipping over and crashing to the floor. Gigi Ghost. Carter choked out, his throat seizing up. You're dead. I saw the car. I saw the fire. Uncle Robert looked like he had been struck by lightning. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. The silver-tipped cane slipped from his grasp, clattering loudly against the table. A ghost. I chuckled softly, tilting my head. Carter, darling. I thought you said you loved me? Aren't you happy to see me, Serena? Robert finally managed to whisper, stepping back, his hands shaking violently. How? How is this possible? The police, the dental records. Mr. Sterling has very good connections, Uncle Robert, I smiled, gesturing to Julian, who strolled into the room looking like a king surveying his conquered lands. The federal prosecutors stepped in behind him, flashing their badges. What is the meaning of this? Robert shouted, his panic quickly morphing into cornered rage.
Guards.
Remove these intruders. The only people being removed today are you two, Julian said coldly, his deep voice commanding absolute authority. He snapped his fingers. The large projector screen at the end of the boardroom hummed to life. Suddenly, the room was filled with Carter's voice. 30 years old. You didn't even make it to 31, you stupid, arrogant bitch. The video from my study played in crystal clear 4K resolution. The board members watched in absolute horror as Carter drank my father's whiskey and mocked my death. Then Uncle Robert walked onto the screen. With those shares, combined with mine, I will finally have the majority voting power. And as promised, Carter, you will walk away with $500 million. The boardroom erupted into chaos. Board members were shouting. My father stood up, his eyes blazing with fury as he stared down his younger brother. Robert, my father said, his voice trembling with rage. You tried to murder my daughter. It's a fake, Robert screamed, his perfectly groomed hair now disheveled, sweat pouring down his face. It's an AI deepfake. Serena, you malicious little brat. You set me up? Oh, I'm just getting started. I sneered. I turned to the federal prosecutors. Gentlemen, you have the bank records of Robert Vance transferring offshore funds to purchase the untraceable paralytic poison. You also have the recorded confession of Leo the chauffeur, detailing Carter Miller's bribery and attempted murder. And, of course, the forged will on the floor, which constitutes felony fraud. Carter was hyperventilating. He looked like a cornered rat. He suddenly lunged forward, his face twisted in feral desperation, grabbing a heavy glass water pitcher from the table and swinging it directly at my head. Just die, you rich bitch, he screamed. He never even got close. Julian moved with terrifying speed. He grabbed Carter's wrist, twisting it violently until a loud snap echoed through the room. Carter dropped the pitcher, shrieking in agony, falling to his knees. Julian didn't let go. He drove his knee into Carter's ribs, pinning him painfully to the floor, his designer shoe pressing ruthlessly against Carter's throat. I warned you to remember your place, I said, looking down at Carter's pathetic, sobbing face. You thought you were playing me for 10 years in a past you don't even remember. But the truth is, you've always been nothing but trash. Serena.
Please.
Carter choked, tears of real, agonizing terror streaming down his face as Julian pressed harder. I was forced. Your uncle made me do it. I love you. I really love you. Take him away. His voice makes me sick, I said, turning my back on him. The police rushed in, hauling a screaming, blubbering Carter to his feet and dragging him out of the boardroom in handcuffs. Uncle Robert didn't fight. He slumped into a chair, utterly broken, his empire of lies collapsing around him as the prosecutors read him his rights. The aftermath was swift and merciless. The scandal rocked the financial world, but Vance Corp stock actually surged after I took over as CEO, replacing my father, who decided to retire early. Uncle Robert was sentenced to 30 years in federal prison for conspiracy to commit murder and corporate fraud. He wouldn't survive a decade in there. As for Carter, I made sure he got exactly what he deserved. He was convicted of attempted murder, fraud, and extortion. I hired the best, most vicious lawyers in New York to ensure he received the maximum sentence with no possibility of parole. I even pulled a few strings to have him placed in a maximum security facility known for its grueling labor programs. He wanted to be a security guard? Now he could guard the prison laundry room for the rest of his miserable life. 6 months later, the air in Paris was crisp and filled with the scent of blooming roses. I stood on the balcony of the Ritz, looking out at the Eiffel Tower glittering in the night sky. Strong arms wrapped around my waist from behind. Julian kissed the curve of my neck, his breath warm against my skin. Mrs. Sterling, he murmured, his voice sending a familiar thrill down my spine. You're neglecting your husband on our honeymoon. I leaned back against his chest, smiling. We had married 2 days ago in a private ceremony on the Amalfi Coast. No fake romance, no ulterior motives. Just two equals who had fought through fire and come out holding each other's hands. I was just thinking, I said softly, turning around to loop my arms around his neck, about how lucky I am. Julian smiled, his dark eyes looking at me with an intensity that took my breath away.
No, Serena.
I'm the lucky one. You could have conquered the world all by yourself, but you let me stand beside you. Conquering the world gets boring alone. I whispered, pulling him down for a kiss. As our lips met, I closed my eyes, leaving the ghosts of my past life behind forever. I had died once in a cold bed, surrounded by lies. But in this life, I was wide awake, fiercely alive, and I held the world in the palm of my hand.